Hey everyone, Internet PCS book reader here. Today I want to talk about We Do Not Part by Kang, translated by yaewon and Paige Aniyah Morris. I have read almost all of Kang's translated work. She is one of the few authors whose each work are so different from each other. My favorite is still The Vegetarian, which is basically a horror highlighting how absurd people's reaction to a woman who decided to become a vegetarian. The closest comparison to storytelling I think is Mouthwashing, where a big part of the story you'll have to figure out from context clues. The other two books that I've read, the white books where she used more than 60 different items that is the color white, and then write some short meditative segment on each item to explore her feelings of having a sister that died soon after she was born. It's a bit too poetry for me. And then her previous one, Greek album, despite having some good moments, is a bit too experimental for me. But to my surprise, she released this book not long after Greek lesson and it won the Nobel Prize, so I'm looking forward to what she wrote this time. The book opens with an author who dreams about a graveyard near the ocean where the whales started to dig the bodies. She was still panicking about how to get their body back to their grave when she wakes up. She was called one time at the book as Kyung-ha, and I think she's at least partially an insert of the author Han Kang herself. She had this dream because of the book that she wrote about the massacre in G in 2014. It's most likely another of Han Kang's book that I haven't mentioned, Human X, a book about the massacre in Gwangju. After she wrote that book, she started having nightmares that made it difficult for her to sleep, so she decided to move to an apartment to live there by herself to try to fix her schedule, but it only made it more difficult for her to fall asleep. It made it worse. She even developed some severe agoraphobia and death anxiety that made her so sick she wrote her will at one point. Ironically, it was while writing this will and trying to figure out who she would give her belongings to that she found a will to live. To this she wrote, "Life was exceedingly vulnerable, I realized. The flesh, organs, bones, breaths passing before my eyes all held within them the potential to snap, to cease so easily and by a single decision." She tried to actually live instead of just being half dead, but first she had to finish her will, to do the one thing she knows she's good at, writing, which is also the thing that made her have this nightmare in the first place. She dreamed of armies that started marching down the street. She might even have hallucinated one in real life, although she couldn't be sure since she never mentioned it or asked about it to anyone. One time, to try to stop the nightmare, she tried to ask her publisher to maybe launch her book faster, hoping it would end the nightmare once the book is out, which she realized is foolish. The book was eventually published, but the nightmare of course didn't stop. She eventually dreamed of the graveyard was by the ocean and tried to plant trees to maybe appease the dead. She even made a promise with her friend to make it into an art project, but both of them are too busy to actually do it. Then finally, the will, her latest attempt at ending the nightmare. She tried to write and rewrite her will every day over and over again until the heat of summer turns to the cold of winter. When suddenly, Incheon, a friend of her who she worked together in a magazine for 3 years and has been friends for 2 decades, called her, asking Kyung-ha to come at her urgently. Incheon is a short filmmaker. Her rise to fame was making a documentary in Vietnam, interviewing a woman who was assaulted by South Korean soldiers during the Vietnam War. Then she made another documentary about Oh Kwang-sim, the Manchurian woman who was fighting for Korean liberation until she had a dementia in her old age. She then made a documentary about herself that flopped before, to everyone's surprise, she retired into carpentry in Jeju to care for her mother. She continued her carpentry work after her mother died, where she got a lot of injury from the machinery. And Kyung-ha suspected that the emergency call to meeting was due to a bad incident. And she did. Incheon cut her finger badly. She bled out until she was unconscious, and it was only due to a delivery from a neighbor coming in to check on her that she was safe, and then sent to a hospital in Seoul. They tried to reattach her finger, but the procedure meant that they had to keep the wound fresh, hurting her every 3 minutes. They have done this for 2 days, and worse, she had to endure it for 3 weeks more, and even worse, since she has experienced the pain for a few days, she can't give it up now or she'll live with a phantom pain for the rest of her life. They haven't really talked much for some time despite being friends, but they used to be really close. So close that Kyung-ha was the only person that Incheon told about her mother's death, and Incheon was the friend that Kyung-ha told about her nightmare about making a project to record trees together. But they have drifted apart since. Incheon was not even in Kyung-ha's consideration for her will. The Winter Tree Logs project was eventually abandoned, but only by Kyung-ha, who no longer see any point in making the documentary for her nightmare. But Incheon continued with the project, carving the woods herself. And it was actually while doing the project that she cut off her finger. That's also why she called Kyung-ha, because she needed a favor from her. Not to blame her for her finger or to ask her to continue the project in her stead, but to go to her house at a village in Jeju to take care of her pet bird Ama if she's still alive. While it is a bit unreasonable to ask Kyung-ha to just drop everything and go to Jeju, Kyung-ha doesn't really have much going on in her life right now, so she decided to go to Incheon village despite the heavy snow. Once she arrived at Jeju, she took a bus since that's the only transport still goes on during the snow. In the bus, she saw a guy who stranded on Jeju because the transport, including the plane, are grounded for that day. That's the kind of place that Incheon lived with her mother. Another place village that doesn't feel like the rest of South Korea. While she is close enough with her mother now that Incheon chose her over her own career in documentary, there was a time that she grew resentful living in such a space with only her mother that she once runs away from home. She ran away to Seoul to live with her only aunt and tried to work there, but she fell on a construction site and got hospitalized because of the injury. Her mother visited her during this time, and instead of blaming Incheon for running away, she told Incheon about their family, how they were all killed by soldiers and police during the Jeju uprising. That's why Incheon's mother and aunt are the only living member of their family, because they were away from home during the massacre. And this experience is what pushed Incheon into making documentaries. Kyung-ha has been to the village a few times before when she was still working with Incheon, but she was never alone. Incheon was always there. And for someone who just recently developed agoraphobia, the heavy snow and the strangeness of the situation makes it difficult to get to Incheon's place. She had to change bus and walk through heavy snow, even losing her phone while protecting herself from the gusts of cold wind. She also lost her consciousness once while walking, almost falling asleep in the middle of the snowstorm. After what feels like a long struggle, she finally arrived at Incheon's house, but she's too late. Ama, the bird, is already dead when she arrived. She buried Ama, then had a long fever until she fell asleep, and when she woke up, her fever is gone, the nightmare is gone, Ama is somehow back alive, and Incheon was there. Here we enter the second part of the book, where they both talk about the book and documentaries that they've made about the historical part of it that is still deeply connected with them. How the Jeju Massacre, Mungyong Massacre, and other mass killing done by South Korea have shifted the course of their life. This is such a well-written story. There are parts of the book that is so obviously poetry, and often when a storyteller does this, the story and the poetry feels disconnected, like most musicals where the story just stops so everyone can suddenly sing and dance, but they're so seamless here, so integrated into part of the storytelling that you don't feel like they're two different storytelling at all. And this very delicately written story managed to also tell the story of one of the most untold mass killing done by South Koreans. The depravity of their action in Vietnam and also in South Korea following their role as US ally. It is part of US brutal anti-communist propaganda during the Cold War that also pricked Indonesia and many Southeast Asia countries and Brazil. I can see how this novel won Asia's first Nobel Prize for Literature. Han Kang did an amazing job here. The book really feels like a culmination of everything she has learned from writing all her other works. We can see part of what makes human act so good, a historical fiction that highlighted the injustice that South Korea government has done to their own people. We can see what makes the White Book interesting with its experiment at symbolism and poetry. We can see what makes The Vegetarian so good with its focus at the character experiences. We can even see the better parts of the storytelling that she did in Greek lesson. And the different kind of good storytelling that you see in those other books, you can see them here. I give this a 5. What do you think? Let me know if I miss anything, so leave your thoughts in the comment below and subscribe to the channel. That's about it. See ya.